Morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've often found myself receiving fire from both Zanu PF supporters, CCC/MDC supporters, and Zanu PF supporters masquerading as CCC supporters. Zanu PF supporters are genuinely concerned that my repeated call for democratic reforms to be implemented so that we could have free, fair, and credible elections are genuinely concerned because, of course, Zanu PF doesn't want free, fair, and credible elections. They know they will never win free, fair, and credible elections. They've never wanted free, fair, and credible elections. And therefore, then, anyone who is calling for reforms has to be an enemy of Zanu PF. MDC CCC supporters have criticized me for accusing MDC leaders for failing to implement even one token democratic reform in the last 23 years, including the 5 years in the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so. The criticism is, of course, born out of ignorance and naivety. One has got to understand that these MDC supporters are tribesmen in every sense of that word. It was the Greeks who first described human beings as falling in three different groups. The lowest one is the idiot, the one who, the individual who only thinks of himself and doesn't care about anything else. And the second level is the tribesman, the one who only thinks about the tribe. The tribe is his god, and the leader in the tribe is worshipped. He is the demigod who can do no wrong. And the tribe's number one allegiance is to the leader and to the tribe. And so, to talk of democratic elections and democratic accountability doesn't make any sense to the tribesman. All he cares about is what is good for the tribe. The rest he doesn't care. Democracy only thrives when you have got the electorate who are well educated, knowledgeable, and diligent. Diligent in the sense that they will hold those in public office to account. Knowledgeable in the sense that they know that leaders are mere mortals, fallible mortals. And therefore then they'll look for the evidence. If they can find the evidence that a particular leader is proven to be corrupt, incompetent, etc., they're willing to stand up and say that leader is corrupt and incompetent. And for the good of the nation, we should replace him. Whether he belongs to the party that I belong to is irrelevant. That is not in the interest of the nation. What is in the interest of the nation is that we should have competent leaders handling public affairs. The tribesmen would not see that. And so we come back to the reality in Zimbabwe, where the MDC, CCC, diehard supporters out there, they failed, even now with the benefit of hindsight, to see the reality that MDC leaders were elected to implement democratic changes necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That was the number one priority. That was in the national interest. But to these tribesmen, MDC is my tribe, Nelson Chamisa is my God. So to start questioning whether he has implemented reforms, to them is, what are you talking about? This is a God. We can't question what the God did. Reforms are of no interest to the tribe. Their faith and their allegiance, the blind allegiance, is to the leader and the party. You can't reason with these people. Of course, it is in everybody's interest that we implement the democratic reforms and stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Zimbabwe is a failed state because for the last 44 years, we've failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And hence the reason why we are stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF regime. The last 23 years, we have had MDC, CCC leaders on the political stage for the principal purpose of implementing the reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. The reality is they failed to implement those reforms. Even during the GNU, when they had the golden opportunity to do so, they failed to implement even one reform. I've got there on the screen a comment from, in this case here, let's assume is a genuine MDC supporter, saying that, Wilbert, I should get a car from Zanu PF as a reward for supporting Zanu PF. How have I supported Zanu PF? Do you seriously believe now that Zanu PF will consider somebody who is calling for reforms so that they are free, fair, and credible election, somebody fighting in their corner? Zanu PF has never wanted free, fair, and credible elections. So why would they want to award me, to reward me with a car for calling for reforms and free, fair, and credible elections? But this is the kind of mentality you have with these tribesmen. You have criticized MDC leaders for failing to implement reforms. That makes you an enemy of the tribe. I've been accused of being jealous of Chamisa, envious of him. The truth of the matter is, Nelson Chamisa is the one who misled the people in 2018 and last year. He was told in no uncertain terms, do not participate in these flawed elections, because doing so will give legitimacy to Zanu PF. But he and his friends were hell-bent on participating, and they were doing so out of greed. That is the truth. Why some people keep on denying it beggars belief. I have quoted a book, passage from David Coulter's book, admitting that very point. And I've got it now. Be shown at the bottom of the page there. What Coulter was saying there is exactly what NIBT had said also earlier on in 2015 in an interview, where he admitted that participating in flawed elections, Zanu PF had managed to corrupt the whole electoral system, and participating in these flawed elections was just folly, because he will only be giving Zanu PF legitimacy. So I'm not saying something new here. This is the reality that we are in. Nelson Chamisa persuaded the people of Zimbabwe to participate in the 2018 elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that participating will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. But he did so out of greed. Zanu PF has offered, as they did during the GNU itself, to those who managed to get a few gravely trained seats, their benefits. You get elected MP, you get 60,000 US dollars to buy a car, tax-free. And then there is the generous salary and allowances for being a member of parliament. Those attractions have proven irresistible. And that is exactly what David Coulter is talking about there. That participating in the elections in 2013 was irrational, but they did it because they also knew that Zanu PF was offering a few gravy train seats to those who participate. They did that in 2018 and did that last year. I've said on this platform that as much as SADC, election observers, came up with a damning report condemning the last year's elections as flawed and illegitimate, SADC leaders found it very difficult to deny Zanu PF legitimacy. They didn't publicly endorse Zanu PF, but they could not publicly deny Zanu PF legitimacy either. Because nearly 2 million people, according to ZEC results, participated in those elections and voted for the opposition. Why would 2 million people participate in an election that is so blatantly flawed? Because they believed Nelson Chamisa. They were so gullible. They believed Nelson Chamisa's statement saying that he was going to plug all the vote rigging loopholes. Of course, he did not. He was just lying. He wanted to participate for the sake of the gravity seats. And the number two reason SADC leaders found it very difficult to deny Zanu PF legitimacy is that even after SADC and the AU election observers had condemned last year's elections as flawed, the CCC leaders who had won the gravity seats went ahead and took up those seats. Indeed, the likes of Tendai BT is on record defending why those people took up their seats. These are liberated zones, he claimed. As if to say, in those areas where the opposition had won the seats, the elections were free, fair, and credible. Of course, that was nonsense. All the elections across the country were done on the basis of a voters' roll. And we know that ZEC never produced a verified voters' roll. Just because Zanu PF allowed the opposition to win some of the few seats, particularly in the urban centers, to give the process credibility, which is exactly what David is talking about here, we are now being told those are liberated zones. SADC leaders, if I was in their shoes, I think I would have done the same thing. If the people of Zimbabwe want to participate in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed, knowing fully well that participating will give Zanu PF legitimacy, it's very difficult for an outsider to say, no, the election is flawed and we are denying Zanu PF political legitimacy. Zimbabwe is heading for 2028 elections. And the way things are going right now, unless the people of Zimbabwe wake up to the reality that without reforms, Zanu PF will blatantly rig 2028 elections, just as they did the 2023 elections, we will be exactly in that position, where Zanu PF has rigged the elections. The position we are in now. And even if SADC were to send electoral observers, they will come up with still the same damning report as they did last year. And SADC will find it very difficult to deny Zanu PF legitimacy. And so the cycle will continue. It is important that we understand that we have got MDC supporters who really are finding it very difficult to think outside the box, to think like citizen and not like tribesman. A citizen, according to the ancient Greeks, is somebody who thinks, who is well educated, well informed, and is diligent enough to see that the interests of the nation are far more important than the interests of the tribe, much less of the leader of the party. What we are seeing consistently with these MDC supporters, and I must say here that there are many MDC supporters pretending to be MDC supporters, when in reality, I believe they are Zanu PF supporters masquerading as MDC supporters. Of course, they are happy with what MDC leaders have done. Of course, they want to see Nelson Chamisa form his new party, his new blue party, and go participate in the 2028 elections without even one token reform implemented, so that Zanu PF would win majority in parliament and the presidency. And so we carry on. I do not believe that some of the individuals out there who are claiming to be MDC supporters are actually MDC supporters. They are Zanu PF supporters, masquerading as MDC supporters. Before I finish tonight, I would like to focus on the first part of that quotation from David Coulter spoke. The 2013 electoral process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw. This is a clear statement. What some of the MDC supporters are finding hard to accept, to swallow, is the last bit. But if the process is so flawed, so illegal, the only logical step is to withdraw. I have yet to hear one MDC supporter stand up and say, well, if the electoral process is flawed, so flawed, and so illegal, that you cannot change the result, and by participating, you're only giving Zanu PF legitimacy, the only logical step is to withdraw. I've yet to hear some of these diehard MDC supporters say that. The number one problem they have, of course, is they look at Chamisa. What does Chamisa say? What does this infallible demigod say? And in this particular case, of course, Chamisa would never admit that. He has never admitted that. While he has accepted that MDC, CCC leaders have failed to implement reforms, he has come up with an answer to that. CCC will win rigged elections because it has come up with strategies of how to win rigged elections. So we are now one of the few countries in the world who have abandoned free, fair, and credible elections because we think we can win rigged elections. Because we believe the opposition can come up with strategies of winning rigged elections. Of course, it is stupid. His argument, one of his strategies of winning rigged elections in last year's elections was this claim that I've plugged all vote tracking loopholes. When you ask him, how have you plugged those? Oh, it is a secret, I can't tell you that. And yet, again and again, at the end of the day, you find Zanu PF rigs elections, clearly showing that he was lying. And in most of these cases, he has backed up his nonsensical claim by claiming that God is in it. Why he keeps on evoking the name of God beggars belief. Here is an individual who has become so big-headed that he thinks he is anointed by God and he's doing God's will. And yet again and again, he has proposed something that is completely outrageous, that one can only describe it as insane. Why would you participate in an election that is so flawed you don't even have a verified voters roll? That you do not even deploy election agencies at the polling stations on voting day, which you'll find is standard practice the world over, even in those countries where there is democratic elections. You need to have people who are observing the process to make sure that it is according to the rules. There are no shortcuts. Chamisa got funding to make sure that he had election agents at all the polling stations. And then it turns out that he didn't deploy them, kept the money in his pocket. How anyone can still maintain that somebody like that is infallible, much less a demigod, beggars belief. I do not mind. Of course, I mind that I'm being called all manner of names. But if that is meant to silence me, I think those people have got something else coming. We need to move out of this mess. And time is ticking. If we do not implement any meaningful reforms, and at the present moment, there's nothing to suggest that there will be any meaningful reforms implemented before 2028. Then what we must do is make sure that at least all those who are eligible to vote understand that participating in a flawed electoral process, so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step is to withdraw. If you participate, you really are thinking like a tribesman. And to be quite honest, even the ancient Greeks did not give the vote to tribesmen because their democracy would have never worked. It's not every Athenian who had the vote. It's only those who were capable of attaining that level of citizen were able to look at the bigger picture and not just focus on themselves or the tribe or the leader. That is the level we have got to aim for. I think if we had enough individuals out there, honest enough to say, well, this issue of participating in flawed elections is really insane. we should stop doing it. Then the opposition will be put under enormous pressure to stop participating in these flawed elections. SADC will be put under enormous pressure to stop granting Zanu PF political legitimacy. That should be our aim. And I think it is achievable. We can't get the opposition divided. CCC has literally imploded. But as long as they are still on the scene, we know they command the 2 million tribesmen out there who are easily conned into participating. Our task is to convince those tribesmen that it is not in their own interest to participate, give Zanu PF legitimacy, and perpetuate the dictatorship. That is the task before us. And we should not be found wanting in pushing that agenda. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good night.